Hello, students. Today I want to brief you about planning your academic paper. So, when you plan your academic paper, what is it that you actually plan? As you should be able to see on your screen, these are the most vital elements that you need to keep in mind as you are planning to write an academic paper for a class. So the first element is your primary text. So during the readings that you cover for a course, which particular text has attracted your attention or has enticed your interest? It could be a novel, it could be a poem, it could be a film as well. So the primary text is a text with which you spend most of your time. If it is a film, you watch it over and over again. So it is very important that you choose a primary text for your academic paper which actually interests you, which actually fascinates you, and you would like to watch it or read it over and over again. After your primary text is almost finalized, you need to look for relevant secondary texts. So at this stage, when you are planning your academic paper, you do not necessarily need to have a kind of secondary texts which are the actual resources you will be citing from. But you should have a general idea of what kind of secondary text you will be using. For example, are these critical articles written by other writers on the primary text that you are dealing with that you will be using? Or are your secondary texts any newspaper archives? Or are your secondary texts any talks on YouTube's, any lectures on YouTube's, so on and so forth. So please remember that secondary texts facilitate you in writing your paper. You do not write your paper on the secondary text. At a later stage, I'll explain to you how do you utilize secondary text to develop your argument in your academic paper. The third thing in planning your academic paper is to have an initial idea of what is going to be your topic. So you chose a film, for example, to write your academic paper on. Now a film has lot many themes in it. So what is in that film that has attracted your attention? For example, do you find racism against any particular group represented in the film? Do you see marginalization of any group? Or do you see any kind of romantic relationship that you would like to talk about? Or do you see any transnational movement which is being represented in that particular film and you want to talk about that? So topic is very important because it will bring a focus in your academic paper. So make sure that you know how much you are supposed to write. If it is a 14 pages paper, for example, you should try to anticipate if the topic that you are choosing is just of the right kind for you to write 14 pages on that. If it is too narrow, probably you won't have much to say about it. If it is too broad, probably you will have to write so much about that. Now, at this stage, because the topic is very tentative, you cannot determine a final topic yet. But it is okay to have that tentative topic to at least take a start. Now, what further sharpens your topic is your thesis. So thesis is a more focused form of your topic, right? So you have a topic. What do you want to do with that topic? For example, you chose to write racism against the African American community in the US. Okay, so what do you want to say about that? Well, the topic is racism against the African American community, but then what is your claim that you want to establish? The thesis is that claim. For example, you might say that this film or this novel represents African American community as racialized in terms of the language, or in terms of culture, or in terms of economy, so on and so forth. So when you attach a category of language, culture, economy, or any other kind of category with racism against the African American community in the US, you are basically turning your topic into a statement of problem, or into a claim, or into a thesis statement. So in more sophisticated terms, you might say that the film represents the linguistic marginalization of African American community in the US. So when you say that the film represents the linguistic marginalization of the African American community, you have brought a focus in your topic, which is sufficiently narrow, but at the same time, not too broad. The next item to plan is theoretical framework. So almost always, when you write an academic paper in the discipline of literature and humanities, you need to have a theory which informs your analysis of the primary text. So if we once again take the example that I just gave you about the linguistic marginalization of African American community, you need to think about a theory which should inform your analysis of the primary text. So that theory could be about linguistic marginalization. That theory could be about the relationship between race and language. Or the theory could be about the relationship between marginalization and language, right? Now, the theoretical framework is not given. You have to research for that. So you'll have to look around which theoretical framework will be useful for your analysis. So just to give you a hint, mostly a particular course that you are studying with an instructor, the theoretical frameworks are part of the readings, right? So you need to look around in the readings which have been provided to you by your instructor to see if any of those readings fits the kind of analysis that you want to undertake, the kind of topic that you want to study, and the kind of claim that you want to establish. The next item is arguments. It will be too early at this stage for you to have polished arguments. However, you should start thinking about the number of arguments that you will be producing. Will you write 3 arguments, 4 arguments, 5 arguments? And also some basic idea of what kind of arguments will that be? Will you be taking dialogues of the characters in a film and then base your arguments on those dialogues? Will you be taking scenes from a film and basing your arguments on those scenes? Or will there be a mix of dialogues and scenes? And you will be basing your arguments on both. So a tentative anticipation of those arguments at this stage will be helpful. And finally, what conclusion will you draw? Again, it's too early for you to have a definite conclusion. However, in line with the claim or thesis that you have tentatively planned, you should think about the possible conclusion and inferences that you will be drawing. Now, just one last rule of thumb. You can plan your paper, you can plan your academic paper along these points that I just shared with you by jotting down a tentative outline of your paper. Even if that outline is very shallow at this stage, it is too skeletal at this stage, but unless you have this outline, you will not have any flesh to fill in this skeleton. So I would suggest you to start planning your academic paper along these points in the form of an outline. Thank you for listening. Please let me know if you have any questions.